They were not the clumsy, dim-witted cavemen we once imagined. They were something stranger, something stronger, creatures of ice and fire honed by a world harsher than our own. The Neanderthals walked across frozen valleys with bodies shaped for survival, lungs like bellows, hands that could grip with crushing force. They hunted beasts twice their size at arm's length, crafted tools bound with tar and fire, and left behind whispers of culture. Pigments smeared on shells, circles of stone in caves no sunlight ever touched. And yet, after hundreds of thousands of years of thriving, their footprints faded. Climate shifted, new humans arrived, and slowly the echoes of their voices vanished into silence. Still, not all was lost. A part of them remains, not only in artifacts and bones, but inside us, carried quietly in our DNA. Tonight, by the glow of story, we will follow their trail. We will walk with them through storms, sit beside their fires, see the world through their eyes, and ask, what does it mean that another kind of human once lived, so near to us, so like us, and yet not us? This is ancient Fireside, where history becomes a story for rest. If you find comfort here, you are welcome to like or subscribe, and perhaps leave a comment with where you're listening from and the time of night. Now, let the embers brighten. Let us step into the cave where fire waits and the story begins. Deep inside a cave where the walls glisten faintly with moisture and smoke curls lazily upward, a small fire flickers like the heartbeat of an ancient world. Imagine the sound of resin hissing as it meets the flames, the warm glow spreading against stone, the cave itself breathing as if alive. Out beyond the mouth of this shelter, winds sweep over a frozen landscape, rattling through skeletal trees, carrying with them a chill so sharp it could cut through bone. It is here, against this backdrop of ice and fire, that the story of the Neanderthals begins. Not as the brutish caricatures we once painted in textbooks, but as beings honed by cold, shaped by survival, and surprisingly sophisticated in their own right. Tonight we will follow their footprints across snow and time, tracing their lives from the body outward. From flesh and bone to hunting and energy, to fire and tools, to mind and culture, and finally to the mystery of why they vanished and what traces of them remain in us. For a long while, Neanderthals were thought of as dull-witted cavemen, dragging clubs and grunting through life. But archaeological discoveries have steadily overturned that lazy picture. Far from being primitive, they were adapted marvels, their very skeletons bearing witness to a specialised strength and resilience. Their rib cages, for instance, were shaped like barrels, expanding outward in a way unlike our own. This design allowed for larger lungs, breathing deeply into the icy air, feeding oxygen to muscles that would be tested daily against the demands of a frigid world. Their faces, too, told a story of adaptation. The noses were large and projecting, a shape likely helping to warm and moisten cold air before it reached their lungs. Imagine standing in a blizzard, nostrils burning. Their anatomy gave them a hidden furnace in the face, a biological scarf against the cold. And then there was the jaw. Strong, forward, almost jutting, built not only for biting but also for a peculiar extra task. Their front teeth, those heavy incisors, are often found worn down in archaeological skulls. Not worn from chewing alone, but from use as a third hand. The Neanderthal mouth was a multi-tool, stripping hides, holding wood while it was worked, gripping sinew as tools were assembled. Picture someone leaning close to a fire, clamping a strip of leather between their teeth, both hands occupied with scraping and shaping. A strange intimacy between mouth and craft, an intimacy so constant that it left permanent grooves in enamel. Of course, not every scientist agrees on the precise advantages of those features. Some debate remains about just how much those oversized nasal passages actually helped in warming air. Was it truly a life-saving innovation, or a side effect of other structural changes in their skull? And the question of their barrel chest, did it really give them endurance, or was it simply one more variation among human forms? These uncertainties remind us that even as we reconstruct their world, we are peering through a fog of millennia. What is clear, though, is that their bodies were not clumsy mistakes. They were blueprints drafted in ice. Close your eyes and picture them stepping out from the cave at dawn, their footprints pressed deep into snow, the stride heavy but sure. Steam rises from their mouths with every breath, a visible testament to lungs working like bellows. Around them, cliffs loom pale, the silence broken only by the crack of ice, and the distant call of animals moving through the frost. We, in the comfort of modern warmth, might shiver just imagining it. But for them, this was home, and their bones, their lungs, their teeth, all were instruments tuned to the frozen symphony. There is something humbling in this realization. For centuries we placed ourselves above them, assuming superiority. Yet, looking closely, their bodies reveal not inferiority but specialization. They were not clumsy branches on the tree of humanity, but a strong limb reaching in a different direction, thriving for hundreds of thousands of years. In their cave, by their fire, they were not freaks of nature in the way of something grotesque, but freaks in the sense of extraordinary exceptions, beings sculpted by elements that would wither us. As the firelight trembles across stone walls, the picture of them becomes sharper. Thick ribs expanding with breath, a wide nose pulling in frozen air, teeth pressed into labour like fingers, each part of the body not only survival but memory, a record of countless winters endured, and with every detail the old stereotype fades further into the dark, replaced by a portrait far more human and far more fascinating. And so, with the cave glowing and the wind howling outside, we step into this long journey. The Neanderthals stand at the threshold, their silhouettes etched against firelight. They are waiting for us to walk beside them into their world, to follow their tracks through snow, to feel in our own lungs the chill they mastered. This is only the beginning, the first spark of a much longer night of stories. The fire pops softly. Ash drifts upward, disappearing into the dark of the cave roof, and in that sound, in that gentle crackle, our story takes its first breath. Soon, we will leave the glow of the fire and move with them into the hunt, where strength and danger meet. But for now, we rest at the hearth, seeing their bodies not as brutish shells, but as living furnaces of survival. The warmth of bone and the breath of ice, bound together in the shape of a human who was both like us and not. Step outside the cave now, where the night air is sharp and the snow crunches beneath heavy feet. Imagine a Neanderthal standing with a spear in hand, shoulders hunched against the cold, arms corded with strength that seems to ripple even in stillness. We cannot measure their muscles directly, those soft tissues long since vanished into soil, but we can read their power from what remains, the bones, and bones, when studied carefully, speak louder than flesh. Archaeologists look at attachment sites where muscles once clung to bone, the roughened ridges and expanded surfaces that tell of constant strain. In Neanderthals, those sites are pronounced, almost exaggerated. From this, biomechanical models estimate that their upper body strength could reach 1.5 times greater than our own average. Some even suggest closer to twice in certain movements. Picture gripping a heavy branch and twisting it until it splinters. What feels like impossible effort to us may have been routine to them. Their grip force is reconstructed to exceed 200 pounds, enough to crush or control prey in close combat. It is not hyperbole, but inference, an ancient body built for a brutal theatre. The style of their hunting explains much of this. Unlike us, who later developed projectiles that allowed distance between hunter and hunted, Neanderthals often faced animals at arm's length. Their spears were designed more for thrusting than throwing, heavy and durable, intended to pierce through hide and muscle with sheer force. Imagine lunging at a charging bison, the spear braced against your chest, the impact reverberating down into your ribs. Such combat was not elegant. It was raw, violent, and it left marks not only on the prey but on the hunter. And here enters one of the quirks that bring their story close to ours. Their skeletons bear patterns of injury strikingly similar to those of rodeo riders in the modern world. broken ribs, fractured arms, trauma across the torso, wounds earned from being struck by massive thrashing animals. The comparison to rodeo cowboys is not poetic license, it is a clinical observation. Both groups lived in a dance of danger with creatures many times their size, and both paid the price in scars. Among the most poignant examples of resilience is the skeleton, discovered at La Chapelle-aux-Saints in France, often called the Old Man. This individual lived decades despite severe injuries and degenerative disease. His bones show crippling arthritis, tooth loss, and fractures that would have made hunting impossible. And yet he survived, because others must have cared for him, shared food, protected him, offered warmth. In those worn bones lies evidence of community, of compassion amid hardship. Neanderthal strength, then, was not only in the bulging of muscle, but in the bonds of kin. Of course, not all scholars agree on the precision of these strength estimates. The leap from bony ridges to pounds of force is steep, filled with assumptions about muscle mass, tendon angles, and daily use. Some argue that the difference between us and them may have been less dramatic, perhaps only modestly greater. Others insist the models understate the truth, that we still cannot fathom what their bodies endured. The truth likely sits somewhere in the grey, the bones whispering louder than certainty but softer than proof. Still picture it. A Neanderthal gripping a spear so tightly the wood groans under pressure, then driving it forward into the flank of a massive beast. The muscles in the shoulders ripple, the chest expands, the legs brace in snow. This is not the myth of brutishness, it is the reality of specialization. Strength was not show, but survival. To live in their world was to measure one's day in the strain of tendons and the ache of bone. We might wonder how that strength felt in everyday life. Did they casually lift logs that would strain us? Did children watch their parents with awe as they cracked bones for marrow with a twist of the wrist? In a world without machines, strength itself was the machine, the tool always at hand. Even in the quiet moments by the fire, the weight of that body must have been palpable, each gesture carrying a density, a gravity, as if the cold itself had been compressed into their muscles. And yet, despite the hardships, there was tenderness. The old man at La Chapelle reminds us that strength alone could not define them. It was the willingness of others to share their own strength that allowed the frail to live. It is tempting to imagine a younger hunter kneeling beside him, pressing food into his hands, adjusting the furs around his shoulders. In the silence of winter, perhaps the true measure of their power was not the crushing of prey, but the sustaining of each other. The snow continues to fall as we linger on this image. A people forged by necessity into bodies of remarkable resilience, their bones echoing with both violence and care. They were athletes of survival, not performers, but practitioners in a constant arena where the stakes were life and death. Every fracture healed imperfectly is a story. Every ridge of bone is a ledger of effort. In those records, we meet them not as caricatures, but as kin, built differently but dreaming under the same stars. As we turn from the study of muscle and bone, we feel the transition forming. Strength may have been their shield, but survival demanded more. It was not enough to withstand the cold or wrestle beast into the snow. They also had to master the balance of warmth and sustenance, to keep the fire within burning by feeding it with the outside world. And so the story moves from power in the body to power in the furnace of metabolism, to the ways Neanderthals managed the relentless demands of energy. The spear is lowered now, its tip blackened from flame. The hunter exhales, a plume of vapour curling beneath a starry sky. And in that breath, we glimpse the next thread of their tale. How bodies such as these kept their fires stoked through endless winters, drawing strength not just from sinew, but from the food and heat that life itself required. Step deeper into the cold, and notice how silence thickens around you. The wind does not simply move across the land. It presses, it cuts, it tests the very boundaries of life. In such a place, only a body designed for endurance could survive. The Neanderthals were not mistakes of evolution, but tailored responses to ice. Their very shape, from shortened limbs to stocky torsos, spoke the language of climate. If you compare their bodies to ours, you will see that Neanderthals were shorter on average but far more robust. Their arms and legs were thick, compact, and strong. Their trunks, wide and deep, lowered the ratio of surface area to volume. This mattered because heat escapes through surface area, and the less exposed, the more warmth conserved. It is the same principle you notice in polar bears or Arctic foxes: rounded bodies, small extremities, compact silhouettes. In biology, this pattern is codified in what is called Bergmann's and Allen's rules, describing how mammals adapt their proportions to climate. Neanderthals, dwelling in the coldest corners of Ice Age Europe, fit these rules perfectly. Close your eyes and imagine one of them standing at the edge of a snowy ridge. His silhouette is sturdy, his legs slightly bowed, his chest broad like the trunk of an oak. There is no wasted length, no spindly angles, only curves and thickness that keep the furnace of his body burning. The wind cuts, but it finds a little purchase. The cold gnaws, but warmth is held close. To look at such a figure is to see the architecture of survival written in bone and flesh, and inside the machinery of warmth worked in subtle ways. Their lungs, larger than ours, drew in air deeply, fueling metabolism with oxygen. Their circulatory systems pumped warmth outward, hands and feet staying functional longer in freezing conditions. Some scientists speculate that they possessed more active deposits of brown fat than we do. Unlike the white fat that stores energy in modern humans, brown fat burns energy to produce heat directly. In newborn infants today, brown fat helps maintain temperature before shivering takes over. Imagine then an adult Neanderthal whose very fat smouldered like hidden embers beneath the skin, a biological layer of warmth unseen yet vital. Of course, this idea remains partly speculative. Brown fat is difficult to detect in ancient remains. No fossil can show it. Genetic traces hint at its possibility, and climate models make it plausible, but the degree to which it mattered is still debated. Was it a constant defence against the cold, or only a seasonal flicker switched on in winter months? Did their bodies shift rhythms with the seasons like the animals they hunted? We cannot answer with certainty, but the possibility adds another dimension to how they endured. Picture the rhythm of their year. Winter locked the land in silence. Food scarce. Nights long. In these months their bodies conserved, their movements slowed, their fires kept small but steady. Then came spring, and with it, migrations of animals. Reindeer flowing through valleys, bison stamping over plains. The Neanderthals followed, their compact bodies climbing slopes, crossing icy rivers, each step a calculation of warmth and exertion. The geography itself became an ally or an enemy. Valleys could funnel wind or shelter from it. Hills became vantage points or traps. The land was not just backdrop, but a partner in their survival. This relationship with terrain left traces too. In sites scattered across Europe, archaeologists find hearths dug into the earth in sheltered spots, stones arranged to break the wind, camps placed near ridges where animals would predictably pass. Their knowledge of the land was not accidental. It was cultivated through generations, an inheritance as real as genes. Each footprint in snow was both individual and collective, part of a map passed silently from elders to children. And again, debate enters. How much of their success owed itself purely to anatomy, and how much to strategy? Were they insulated enough that the cold was less of a threat? Or were they constantly on the edge, using fire and fur to compensate? Some scholars argue that even with their adaptations, Neanderthals lived at the limits of endurance, one bad season away from catastrophe. Others counter that their long tenure, hundreds of thousands of years, proves their adaptations were more than sufficient. Between these views lies the mystery of their resilience, shaped by climate, yet always negotiating with it. In the imagination, you might see a family gathered at the cave mouth as snow falls heavy. A child presses close to a mother's side, small hands warmed beneath thick furs. A father squats near the fire, his breath misting as he feeds kindling. Their forms are compact, their eyes watchful, their bodies carrying generations of survival. They are not struggling caricatures, they are masters of their element. For them, cold was not an intruder, it was the teacher that sculpted their form. The quirky thought arises. In such a world, the very act of breathing may have sounded different. Deeper chests, broader rib cages, greater lung capacity. What kind of voice resonated from those throats? Perhaps lower, fuller, carrying across valleys like the roll of distant thunder. A reminder that strength and survival are not just in silence, but also in the timbre of human sound. The snow muffles everything now. The land is white, the air heavy, the sky grey. But within, their bodies are small furnaces, conserving, radiating, resisting. They leave their prints in snow, short but firm, a rhythm of steps that mark their passage across ice. Each footprint is both fragile and enduring, soon to vanish with wind, but echoing across millennia into the soil where archaeologists will one day read their presence. And so, in the architecture of their bodies, in the strategies of terrain, we see how Neanderthals did not simply endure the Ice Age, they belonged to it. They were sculpted by climate, sculptors of survival in return. Theirs was a pact with the land, a pact carved into their bones and traced in their steps. Now, as the fire glows low and their silhouettes huddle together, the story bends toward sustenance. Strength and warmth alone were not enough. The furnace within had to be fed, and constantly. How did these bodies, so demanding, sustain themselves through endless winters? The answer lies in calories, in the rhythm of hunt and feast, in the shared meals that turned frozen valleys into banquets of survival. That is where we go next. The cave fire dwindles behind us as we follow the trail of footprints into a frozen valley. The sky is pale, streaked with clouds that promise snow, and the air carries the low, muffled silence of expectation. Somewhere ahead, a herd shifts, hooves crunching the frost, breath steaming like geysers in the morning light. Here, survival was written not only in warmth, but in confrontation. For the Neanderthals, the hunt was not a distant contest of arrows, but a visceral clash, body against body, spear against flesh. Their weapons tell us this. Excavated from sites across Europe, the wooden spears are heavy, often more than 2 meters long, carved with pointed ends that were hardened in fire. These were not the feathered darts or bows that allowed later hunters to stand back and release. They were thrusting spears, designed to be driven into muscle at close range. Archaeologists know this not only from the tools themselves, but from the marks they left on bones. Deep punctures in ribs of horses, reindeer and bison, all pointing to a weapon delivered with force rather than flight. Picture the moment. A group of hunters lying in wait along a narrow corridor of land, perhaps a natural funnel where cliffs pressed inward. The herd approaches, and suddenly the air is full of sound. Snorts, pounding hooves, shouts. A Neanderthal rises, plants his feet wide in the snow, and drives the spear forward as an animal crashes into him. The impact is thunderous. The body reels with it, muscles straining to keep the shaft steady. In that heartbeat, survival balances on the tip of wood and will. It is no wonder, then, that their skeletons carry the signatures of violence. Fractured ribs, broken arms, injuries concentrated on the upper body. Patterns eerily similar to those catalogued in modern rodeo riders who are tossed and trampled by bulls. The comparison is more than metaphor. Both the Neanderthal and the cowboy met the brute weight of animal flesh head-on, and both bore the same toll. Every scar in bone is a testament to the dangers of hunting without distance. There is even evidence of how they braced for such encounters. Some reconstructions suggest a 3-point stance, where a hunter might drive the butt of the spear into the ground or against his body, lowering the centre of gravity to resist impact. It is not hard to imagine. Knees bent, one arm steadying, the other thrusting, the whole posture like a living tripod set against the charge. Primitive, perhaps, but effective. And yet the method was costly. Injury was frequent, recovery slow, death always near. A single miscalculation, and the hunter was beneath hooves, bones crushed in snow. This reality threads back into the evidence of compassion we saw before. A community had to absorb these costs together. A wounded hunter required food and care, a debt of survival paid by others. The strategy of close-quarter hunting was not only a physical act, but a social one. To fight beasts face to face was to bind the group in mutual responsibility. Here lies a debated question among scholars. Did Neanderthals rely solely on this method, or did they also attempt distance hunting? Some points of stone tools hint at projectiles, and a few suggest lighter spears might have been thrown, but the evidence is sparse, ambiguous. Many argue that their anatomy, the powerful arms, the stocky build, was ill-suited for sustained throwing. Perhaps they could launch a spear in short bursts, but not with the efficiency of later humans armed with atlatls or bows. Others maintain that distance weapons may have been more common than we think, but wood and fibre, perishable in soil, rarely survive to tell the story. The truth is caught between shards and shadows, unresolved but tantalising. Regardless, the weight of evidence leans toward the thrust, and what a weight it must have been. Imagine gripping that spear as firelight flickers across its polished shaft. The wood carries scars from sharpening, its tip blackened where it was hardened in flame. Your hand sweats against it despite the cold. Ahead lies not a practice target, but a beast that outweighs you tenfold. There is no second chance, no quick escape. Your companions are beside you, but each must face the same risk. And yet, time and again, they did it. For tens of thousands of years they met the charge and lived to pass on their stories. There is a strange beauty in this closeness. The kill was not distant. It was felt in the bones, heard in the cracking ribs, smelled in the hot steam of a fallen animal. To eat was to remember the danger just endured. Perhaps this intimacy with prey shaped their sense of life itself. Each meal a reminder of risk, each scar a page in the record of survival. As the day wanes, we see them gather around the carcass. Blood stains the snow, steam rising from the warm body. They work with quick hands, stripping meat, cracking bones for marrow. Children hover at the edges, eyes wide, learning. Strength has been tested, and for tonight at least the fire will burn with plenty. But tomorrow demands more. Bodies like theirs consumed enormous energy, each furnace inside them demanding fuel. The strategy of the hunt, the power of the spear, these were not just acts of danger, but necessities of appetite. How much food did they need? How many calories did those barrel chests and thick limbs burn in the cold? To answer, we step next to their table, measuring not only the meat, but the hidden costs of being Neanderthal. The spear is laid aside now, its point charred from flame and blood. The hunters sit back, breath heavy, eyes catching the first stars in the darkening sky. And in that breath lies the bridge, from the violence of hunting to the quiet arithmetic of nourishment, the ceaseless need to feed bodies that burned like torches in the cold. The fire glows brighter now, fed by the carcass of the hunt. Fat sizzles, marrow drips into flames, and smoke rises to coil among the stalactites. The Neanderthals gather close, hands greasy, mouths working steadily. To us it might seem like a feast after great danger, but for them this was necessity, as constant as breath. Their bodies were not small stoves, but roaring furnaces, and to keep them burning through winters demanded more fuel than most modern humans can imagine. Scientists estimate that a Neanderthal required anywhere from 3,500 to 5,000 calories each day just to sustain the body. That number is staggering if you pause to feel its weight. For a modern office worker, it might be double or even triple the daily need. Picture 3. Thanksgiving dinners, not once a year but every single day, in order to keep warm and strong. Theirs was a metabolism driven by cold air, heavy labour, and muscular frames always in motion. Every calorie was a brick in the wall between survival and collapse, and so their diets were dominated by meat. Evidence comes not only from butchered bones, but also from the chemical signatures within their own skeletons. Isotopic analysis of Neanderthal bones reveals nitrogen levels that place them at the very top of the food chain higher even than wolves or other predators of their time. They were apex carnivores, drawing energy from red meat, marrow and fat. Horse, bison, reindeer, even woolly mammoth and rhinoceros, all fell under their spears. Imagine a snowy plain, the massive shape of a mammoth crumpling, a community gathering around to carve it into meals that could last days. But it would be wrong to imagine them as eating only flesh. In recent years, dental calculus, the hardened plaque left on teeth, has yielded tiny fragments that tell another story. Under the microscope, grains of starch appear, along with traces of plant matter and even chemical residues that suggest medicinal use. One Neanderthal's teeth revealed particles of yarrow and chamomile, bitter herbs unlikely to have been eaten for pleasure. Instead, these may have been chosen for their soothing effects, perhaps easing digestion or pain. Another bore traces of salicylic acid, the same compound that forms the basis of aspirin, found in willow bark. Picture it, a Neanderthal chewing willow twigs to dull a headache or a fever, an ancient pharmacology practiced with no written recipe, only memory passed from generation to generation. This is one of the quirks that makes their story more intimate. We can see them not only as hunters but as foragers with knowledge of healing. A child with a toothache perhaps being offered a bitter stalk to chew. A hunter nursing a wound, soothed by the bark of a tree. These details remind us that their meals were not only fuel but medicine, taken with purpose beyond hunger. Still, debate lingers about just how much plants mattered in their diets. Some argue that meat provided nearly all their energy, with plants only occasional supplements. Others suggest the role of plants may be underestimated since soft foods decay and rarely leave archaeological traces. What is clear is that their diets varied with season and place. A group living in forested valleys may have had more roots and nuts. Another on open steppe may have relied almost entirely on large game. Their menu was not a single recipe but a shifting balance, tuned to the land's rhythm. Imagine sitting beside them now. A hunk of roasted reindeer passes from hand to hand, juices dripping. A stone is cracked to reveal marrow sucked warm from the bone. A child gnaws at tendon while in the background an elder grinds seeds between stones, mixing them with fat into a kind of primitive cake. The smell is thick, musky, nourishing. There is no ceremony, no ritual grace, only the direct gratitude of eating after exertion, and every bite mattered. A single miscalculation, a hunt gone wrong, a migration missed, a storm that scattered herds, could mean hunger that threatened the whole group. The body demanded so much that scarcity pressed constantly at the edges of survival. Perhaps this pressure explains their relentless hunting style, their willingness to risk injury for the chance at meat. To fall short of calories was to court death, not in weeks, but in days. In this constant balancing act, the environment shaped not only their bodies but their choices. A valley rich with grazing animals was worth defending. A migration path was worth remembering across generations. Food was not only sustenance but geography, memory and story. The placement of camps, the direction of travel, all were tethered to the invisible thread of calories. And as we consider this, another layer of reflection opens. For all their physical differences, this struggle was not foreign. We too know the link between food and survival, even if in our modern world it comes softened by abundance. But picture hunger as they knew it, the gnawing urgency that demanded 3,000 or 4,000 calories daily. In that light, every successful hunt was not merely a victory, it was reprieve, a pause in the endless arithmetic of need. The fire crackles lower now. A child yawns, full and drowsy, curled beside a parent. Outside the snow falls steadily, softening the land, burying the bloodstains of the hunt. For tonight the furnace inside each body is satisfied, the flames within as steady as the flames without. But dawn will come again, and with it the demand for more. From the table of meat and herbs our story bends onward. Feeding the body was never only about the stomach. It was also about timing, strategy, and the land itself. How did Neanderthals understand migration? How did they use terrain and seasons to multiply their chances of success? To answer, We step with them across ridges and valleys, listening to the wisdom of the land as much as the strength of the arm. The last bones are tossed into fire, cracking in the heat. Smoke rises in ribbons, carrying the smell of fat into the dark. And as the night closes, we turn with them from nourishment to navigation, from the question of what to eat to the question of how to find it, season after season. The snow has settled again, blanketing the valley in silence. When you look across the frozen expanse, it may seem like nothing stirs, but to the Neanderthals, this landscape was alive with patterns. They could read the land as easily as we read words on a page. Valleys, rivers and ridges were not obstacles but guides, lines in an invisible map that told where food would pass, when herds would come, and how survival could be woven from the rhythm of season and place. Neanderthal hunting was not reckless wandering. It was knowledge, stored in memory and passed across generations. Certain valleys served as natural funnels where reindeer or bison would be forced together during migration. Caves opened near water sources where animals came to drink. Sheltered passes provided cover from which hunters could wait. The land itself offered traps, and the Neanderthals learned to use them, not through writing or maps, but through footsteps retraced year after year. Picture them standing along a ridge, scanning the horizon. Below, a herd begins to move, its path dictated by terrain. The hunters know that if they press from one side, the animals will turn toward the gorge, where others lie in wait. It is strategy without written rules, born of repetition and memory. Children likely walked these paths alongside parents, absorbing the map in silence, learning not by instruction but by being present. Each rock, each bend in the river, each shadowed grove carried significance, a silent teacher in the school of survival. The seasons too played their part. Winter demanded conservation, long nights huddled close to fire. But spring brought migration, a surge of life that could not be ignored. Imagine the ground shaking as reindeer poured through narrow passes, thousands of hooves pounding frost. To us it might feel like chaos, but to the Neanderthals it was opportunity, as regular as the rising of the sun. They timed their hunts to these rhythms, knowing when and where the herds would pass, striking in moments when the land itself held the animals in place. Sometimes the terrain acted almost as a partner. A cliff face could be used to corner prey, a river to drive them into shallows, snowdrifts to slow their movement. One can imagine a group of hunters spreading out in formation, guiding a herd toward a bottleneck. The strategy was not unlike chess. Each move anticipated, each piece of land used as leverage. Survival was never a matter of brute force alone, but of understanding the invisible currents that shaped animal behaviour. Archaeological evidence supports this. Sites reveal mass kills where dozens of animals were brought down together, suggesting coordinated effort and use of landscape traps. Some digs show bones scattered in ways that imply entire herds were funneled into ravines. Such findings hint not just at strength, but at planning, communication and cooperation. These were not solitary hunters, but members of a team, each role vital to the outcome. And here lies a quirk worth imagining, the soundscape of the hunt. With no written language, instructions had to be passed through gestures, shouts, or perhaps whistles carried on the wind. Picture a hand raised to signal stillness, a sudden cry to drive animals forward, the pounding rhythm of feet on frozen ground. Hunting was as much choreography as combat, a dance between humans and land and prey. The air itself carried the music of survival. Debate, however, lingers around the details. How large were these groups? Some argue for small bands of 10 to 15, others for larger gatherings in times of migration. Did men and women share roles equally? Or did division of labour echo our later societies? The evidence remains murky, each discovery a fragment rather than a whole. Perhaps the truth was fluid, roles shifting with circumstance, groups expanding or shrinking with need. Survival, after all, does not follow rigid rules, but adapts like water in a stream. Still, the broader picture is clear. Neanderthals did not stumble blindly into meals. They orchestrated them using memory, terrain, and cooperation. Their bodies may have been built for strength, but their minds held maps written in the language of rivers and rocks. Each season, each hunt, was another verse in a song of the land, a song sung not with words but with steps and spears. Imagine the aftermath of such a hunt. A valley quiet again, snow churned by hooves and boots, carcasses strewn across the ground. Hunters move among them, finishing the work, calling softly to one another. Children pick up fragments of antler, learning weight and texture. The fire later that night burns brighter, fed not just by meat, but by the knowledge that the land had yielded once more. In the crackling of that fire lies gratitude, though no one speaks it aloud. The land itself must have felt alive to them, not as an abstract idea, but as a presence. Hills and rivers were companions, valleys old allies. Perhaps they told stories of places, remembered hunts by naming rocks or groves. Even without language as we know it, meaning must have been attached, each site a chapter in their unwritten history. To walk the same ridge each year was to walk with ancestors, their footprints faint beneath fresh snow. This intimacy with place is something we often forget in our modern lives. We move quickly, guided by maps on glowing screens, but the Neanderthals carried their maps in memory, in muscle, in instinct. Each turn of terrain was familiar, each season awaited like an old friend. In that sense, their relationship with the land was not lesser than ours but deeper, stitched into bone and story alike. And yet, one cannot help but wonder, how often did their plans fail? A herd turning too soon, a storm scattering prey, an avalanche cutting off a pass. Survival was not guaranteed, even with knowledge. The land gave, but it also took, and each mistake carried weight. Some archaeologists suggest that high variability in success may have kept their population small, never allowing expansion beyond a certain threshold. Others counter that their endurance across so many millennia proves remarkable stability. The debate continues, echoing like wind across abandoned valleys. The fire burns low now, hunters gathered in a circle, bodies weary but full. They have read the land and answered its riddles, at least for another day, and from the glow of embers the story shifts again. For while the land offered guidance, another partner stood by them. Fire itself, not just as warmth, but as glue, as tool, as technology. From embers and smoke came a new power, one that bound stone to wood and lit the deepest caves. That is where we turn next. The last sparks of the hunt's fire drift upward, vanishing into the dark. The smell of smoke lingers, a promise of what comes. And as the night deepens, the ember's glow becomes our bridge, from the strategy of terrain to the alchemy of flame. The fire has burned low, and smoke clings to the stone ceiling like a dark veil. In that haze, imagine a figure crouched near a shallow pit, carefully arranging bark and stone. This is not the ordinary business of roasting meat or warming a cave. What we are watching is an experiment older than memory, a small workshop where heat itself is harnessed as a tool. Out of these flames, Neanderthals drew something remarkable. Tar distilled from birch-bark, a sticky black substance that would forever change how they bound their world together. At first glance, tar seems unimpressive. It oozes, it stains, it smells sharp like burned resin. But to a Neanderthal, it was nothing short of glue, and glue meant transformation. By smearing tar between stone blade and wooden shaft, they created composite tools, spears and scrapers more durable, more efficient. This is the difference between a stone knife that slips and one that stays secure, between a spear that shatters and one that pierces deep. Tar was the silent partner that turned scattered pieces into singular weapons. And here lies the wonder. To make tar required more than brute strength. It demanded understanding of process, patience and control of heat in ways that rival early chemistry. Birch bark had to be heated slowly, in a container with little oxygen, until its resins melted and condensed into tar. Without such control, the bark would simply burn to ash. Scholars call this a multi-step technique. one of the earliest examples of humans transforming natural materials through deliberate manipulation. It is not merely accident but intention, repeated and passed down. Picture the scene. A small pit is dug in the earth. Bark is layered within, then covered with stones and earth to limit air. A fire is built on top, burning steadily, its heat seeping downward. Hours pass, the cave filling with the smell of resin. Finally, when the fire dies, the pit is opened, and black tar clings to the bark, ready to be scraped and used. This is not a single gesture, but a chain of decisions. What material? How deep? How hot? How long? Each step remembered, each step taught, each step part of a hidden curriculum. Some researchers marvel at this as evidence of advanced cognition. To control fire so delicately is to anticipate outcomes, to imagine not just flame but transformation. It is planning, experimentation, and tradition woven together. Children may have sat near the fire, watching elders work, learning by sight and smell when the process was done. Knowledge was passed not through writing but through gesture, repetition, the rhythm of generations. And there is a quirky thought here. Imagine the smell of birch tar seeping through a cave, pungent and almost sweet. To us, it might be unpleasant, but to them it was the scent of industry, of progress. Some scholars even suggest Neanderthals may have chewed small lumps of tar, not only to soften it for tool use, but perhaps also as a form of antiseptic. Picture someone rolling a black piece between teeth, grimacing at its bitterness, then pressing it onto stone to hold an edge. A strange intimacy, half tool-making, half accidental medicine. Yet, as with much in prehistory, debate persists. How exactly did they discover this process? Was it stumbled upon when bark fell into a fire and left sticky residue? Or was it invented through deliberate trial, a spark of insight repeated until refined? Did different groups develop the technique independently, or was it spread along networks of contact and imitation? These questions remain open, reminding us that behind each lump of tar is a story we cannot fully recover. Still, the significance is undeniable. To craft with tar was to cross a threshold. No longer were tools simply shaped stones or sharpened sticks. Now they were combinations, each piece contributing to a whole greater than the sum of its parts. The hafted spear could pierce deeper, the scraper could work longer, the axe could strike harder. With tar, the Neanderthals expanded the reach of their bodies, extending muscle into wood and stone bound tight. Imagine the feel of such a weapon in hand. The shaft solid, the stone edge secure, the confidence that it would not slip in the moment of impact. A hunter gripping it could trust not only muscle but technology. In that trust lay survival, and in that survival lay the seeds of culture. For once knowledge is passed, it becomes tradition, and tradition is the soil where identity grows. Let the firelight flicker now, illuminating the tar as it glistens in the hand of a maker. The air smells sharp, the stones are blackened, the bark reduced to essence. A tool is lifted, complete. In that gesture, Neanderthal ingenuity is revealed not as clumsy mimicry, but as deliberate mastery. And yet, pause for wonder. This was happening nearly 200,000 years ago, long before our own ancestors would leave Africa or carve the first villages. In the dark of a cave, by the glow of flame, Neanderthals were practicing chemistry, creating one of the earliest synthetic substances known to humankind. Somewhere outside, the night sky is vast, stars scattered across the cold. Inside, a different kind of constellation forms. Fire, bark, stone, tar, and hand, all aligned into a system of knowledge. It is as if the very elements of Earth were persuaded to collaborate, guided by human will. But what does this tell us about their minds? Were they conscious of their innovation, proud of their craft, or was it simply routine? We cannot know. What we can see is continuity, the act repeated across sites and centuries, evidence that this was no accident. It was skill, inherited and cherished, carried in memory like flame carried from one hearth to another. So the story of tar is more than a footnote in archaeology. It is a window into Neanderthal thought, their patience, their discipline, their creativity. And as the tar cools in the cave, the bridge forms to our next reflection. To master tar was to master fire, and fire was not only a tool but a companion, warming, cooking, lighting, binding. From chemistry to comfort, the story flows toward flame, the oldest friend of humanity. The embers shift, a faint hiss as resin burns away. The cave is heavy with smoke, the tools laid out neatly, tar glistening in the glow. From here, our eyes lift to the fire itself, the heart of the camp, the element that made all else possible. Fire is not only the means but the stage, and it is to that stage we now turn. The cave breathes with flame, its walls flicker alive as the fire grows, sending long shadows up into the hollows of stone. For the Neanderthals, fire was never a luxury. It was breath itself, a companion that turned cold nights bearable, raw meat edible and dark spaces into living rooms of warmth and light. To us, fire is simple, summoned with a match or switch. But to them, it was a constant negotiation, something fragile, alive, and sacred in its own way. Archaeological sites whisper this truth. Layers of ash lie deep in cave floors, telling of countless nights where flames were built, rebuilt, and carefully tended. In some places, patches of red-baked stone remain, changed forever by heat so intense it transformed their mineral structure. These are the signatures of hearths, kitchens, and workshops at once, where survival was stoked one spark at a time. First, fire was a bep, a kitchen hearth. With flame, meat could be roasted, fat rendered, marrow softened, roots made edible. Imagine the smell of roasting reindeer, the hiss of fat dripping into coals, the crackle as marrow-filled bones burst with heat. Cooking made food safer, easier to chew, more digestible, releasing energy more efficiently for bodies that needed thousands of calories a day. The fire was the unseen chef, coaxing nourishment from the raw. But the hearth was more than a kitchen. It was also a workshop anvil where materials were transformed. Bones hardened in heat for use as tools. Stones placed in flame would sometimes change colour or texture, flaking differently under pressure. Most importantly, tar from birch-bark, the black glue of survival, could not exist without fire's steady control. Fire was thus a forge, a laboratory, a stage for experimentation. Around its edges, hands worked tirelessly, chiselling, scraping, binding. Every tool carried a whisper of flame within it. And then, fire was a gen, a lamp in darkness. Imagine stepping into the depths of a cave, where blackness swallows sound and sight alike. Without light, there is only blindness, a suffocating absence. Yet Neanderthal traces lead deep into cavern systems, far beyond the reach of daylight. How did they see? Stone bowls carved shallow, filled with animal fat with a scrap of moss or reed set alight. The flame was small, wavering, but enough to illuminate stalactites and walls. With such lamps they ventured inward, leaving behind traces like the enigmatic stalagmite circles of Bruniquel cave, built 176,000 years ago. To make those structures they needed light, organisation, and above all, fire. Pause for a moment and listen to the imagined soundscape of a cave lit by such lamps. The drip of water, the hiss of fat-fed flames, the shuffle of feet on stone. Shadows dance across the walls, flickering like spirits. Children cling to their elders, watching shapes emerge from dark. Fire does not only dispel cold, it creates presence, turning void into stage, carving meaning into stone silence. But fire was never simple to manage. The question lingers in the archaeological debate. Did Neanderthals know how to start fire reliably, or did they mostly keep it once captured? Some evidence suggests they may have relied on maintaining embers, carrying fire carefully from place to place, protecting it as one would protect a child. If it went out, perhaps they rekindled it by striking flint, though the certainty of that skill is debated. Others argue that they mastered ignition techniques we cannot yet confirm, making them less dependent on chance. Either way, the fire demanded vigilance, a watchful presence at every hearth, someone always tasked to feed it, shield it, breathe life back into it when it waned. There is something profoundly human in this relationship. We can imagine a Neanderthal family huddled close, the fire at the centre like a sun. Around it they cooked, crafted, laughed in their guttural voices, perhaps sang or drummed, their shadows flickering as if the cave itself were alive. The hearth was the axis of their world, as essential as water or air. To let it die was to invite death. To nurture it was to invite tomorrow. A quirky image emerges here. Picture a child poking at embers with a stick, the same way children today stir campfires, fascinated by the glow, both fearful and playful. Fire was teacher as much as tool, instilling caution, patience, respect. One wrong move and flames could consume as easily as comfort. One careless night and warmth could vanish, leaving the group shivering in dark. In fire's dual nature, danger and salvation lay the very rhythm of their lives. Fire also shaped their sense of time. Daylight in Ice Age winters was short, night long. Without flame, darkness ruled. With it the day stretched beyond the sun. Stories could be told in the glow, tools crafted by flicker. Children calmed with lullabies to the rhythm of sparks. Fire bent time itself, turning night into an extension of life. The shadows on cave walls may even have inspired early stirrings of imagination, forms half seen, half invented, seeds of art long before paint touched stone. Debates continue among scholars about the consistency of fire use across sites. Some caves show abundant ash layers, suggesting constant fires. Others show patchy evidence, leading to questions about whether fire was used daily or only seasonally. Was fire universal to all Neanderthal groups, or did its presence depend on environment and culture? The answers are not settled, and perhaps they never will be. What is certain is that where we find fire, we find Neanderthals transformed from mere creatures into makers of worlds. Now let us step back to see the broader picture. Fire was more than warmth, more than food, more than light. It was a hub. Around it gathered the body, the mind, the community. It stitched together survival with strands of heat, binding people to one another as surely as tar-bound stone to wood. To sit at a fire was to belong, to feel human in a way that cold alone could never permit. The fire crackles softly now, as if sighing in contentment. Sparks leap upward, disappearing into the cavern roof, like fleeting stars swallowed by night. Neanderthals sit around it, their eyes reflecting orange light, their hands busy with tasks, their hearts steady with warmth. The lamp, the forge, the kitchen, they are all here, glowing together in a single flame. And from this glow, we drift naturally to another thought. If they could make tar, control fire, and pass these techniques along, what does that tell us about their minds? To bind wood and stone with glue is to bind thought into sequence. To tend flame is to imagine tomorrow. Fire does not only warm the body, it illuminates the mind. Our next step, then, is to follow the sparks upward, into the realm of planning, memory, and cognition. The last sparks fall, embers glowing steady. Around them, the hunters rest, the makers sit, the children sleep. Fire, in its gentle rhythm, has given them another night, and as its light softens, we prepare to step deeper, into the mind that imagined it, the memory that sustained it, the cognition that turned flame into tradition. The fire hums low, its embers steady as a heartbeat. Around it, the tools of the day lie scattered, stone flakes, sharpened points, wooden shafts streaked with resin. In these objects, we glimpse not only survival, but thought itself. For every tool, every hafted spear, every flake of stone was born not in the hand alone, but in the mind. Technology is memory externalized, intention hardened into form. With Neanderthals, this truth becomes unmistakable. Their mastery of multi-step tasks reveals a cognitive world more complex than once believed. Consider the making of a hafted spear. It is not a single motion, but a chain of actions. First, select the right wood, straight, sturdy, seasoned enough to resist splintering. Then, carve and scrape until it lies smooth in the hand. Next, shape the stone, knap flakes, choose edges, refine angles until the point gleams sharp. After that, heat birch bark in low oxygen, coax tar from its resinous heart. Finally, press stone to wood, smear tar, bind with sinew, and let it set. This is a sequence of steps that must be remembered, practiced, and taught. Each one depends on the last, and skipping any breaks the whole. Modern psychologists call this executive function, the ability to plan, to hold multiple steps in mind, to anticipate outcomes. For decades, many assumed only Homo sapiens had mastered such cognition, yet the presence of hafted tools among Neanderthal sites argues otherwise. These were not accidents but traditions, repeated and refined. The mind behind them was not a brute instinct but a mind capable of planning, sequencing and teaching. Imagine a group gathered in the firelight, adults working while children watch. A father sharpens a stone edge, his hands moving with practiced rhythm. Beside him, a mother smears tar along a wooden shaft, her expression focused. A child leans close, imitating gestures in the air, memorizing the pattern. There is no textbook, no chalkboard, only sight, smell, sound. Knowledge passes like flame from torch to torch, carried in muscle memory and repetition. Here, a quirky thought surfaces. What did instructions sound like in a Neanderthal camp? We do not know if they had fully structured language, but they surely had vocalizations beyond mere grunts. Perhaps short calls, repeated sounds, rhythms matched to tasks. Picture a parent humming a pattern, tapping stone to demonstrate sequence, guiding a child's hand. Teaching may have been half-spoken, half-mimed, a choreography of sound and movement. The classroom was the hearth, the lesson the tool itself. But scholars still debate how symbolic these acts were. Were tools merely functional, or did they carry identity, style, even artistry? Some tools seem standardized, shapes repeated across regions as if belonging to a tradition. Others vary, suggesting personal touch. The line between utility and culture is hard to trace. Did a certain flake style mark a group's identity? Did a finely worked edge serve as both knife and signature? These questions remain open, hinting that tools may have held meaning beyond use. The implications for cognition are profound. To make tar is to imagine an invisible process, bark heated without flame, substance distilled from within. To haft a tool is to foresee its future use, to picture the hunt before it happens. These acts required more than reaction. They required imagination, anticipation, and memory. In other words, they required mind. Pause and listen to the rhythm of stone struck against stone. Sparks leap, sharp sounds echo in the cave. Each strike is decision. Where to hit, how to angle, how much force. A wrong move ruins the edge. A right move creates perfection. This is not trial alone, but practice honed across years. The tools scattered across cave floors are not debris but lessons, each flake a sentence in the language of skill. And the debate grows richer here. Some scholars argue that Neanderthal cognition was equal to ours, only expressed differently. Others maintain that while capable, their minds lacked the same symbolic depth, the capacity for abstraction that fueled art and myth. What we can say with confidence is that they were not thoughtless. Their tools prove a structured intelligence, one embedded in daily life. Imagine now the intimacy of a night's work. The cave glows orange, the fire crackles, children doze against stone. A mother holds a shaft in her lap, smoothing sinew bindings. The smell of tar rises, sharp and bitter. She tests the edge with her thumb, nods, sets the spear aside. Another tool is finished, ready for tomorrow's hunt. In that simple act, survival and cognition meet. There is beauty in this quiet workshop, Tools pile up, each representing hours of labour and thought. Yet none are displayed as art, none placed in galleries. Their value is in use, not in show, and yet to us they whisper of minds capable of patience and precision, of communities where knowledge flowed and endured. One can even imagine the pride of mastery. Perhaps a young hunter for the first time finished his own spear. He tested it in firelight, felt the weight, the sharpness, the balance. The elders nodded approval. In that moment he was no longer only a learner but a bearer of tradition, ready to carry knowledge forward. Technology was not simply objects but milestones of identity. The fire dims as the night deepens. Tools are set aside, tar cools, children sleep. The camp breathes with satisfaction. They have not only eaten but prepared, not only survived but planned. Tomorrow the hunt will test these tools. Tomorrow memory will meet necessity once again. And so we stand at the threshold where technology meets mind. From stone and tar we glimpse not just hands but thoughts, not just survival but imagination. And as we follow this thread, it leads naturally upward, into the structure of the brain itself, into the hidden chambers of cognition, where vision, planning and culture all converge. The embers glow faintly now, shadows stretching long. A tool lies gleaming in the half-light, tar binding stone to wood. In that glow, the bridge forms. Our eyes lift from the work of hands to the architecture of the skull, to the mind that made such work possible. The embers fade, yet their glow still pulses against the stone walls, as if echoing the glow within the skulls of the Neanderthals themselves. For beyond muscle and bone, beyond spear and tar, their story turns inevitably to the mind. If tools reveal the traces of thought, the brain is its hidden architecture. And here lies one of the most intriguing facts. Neanderthals, on average, carried brains slightly larger in volume than our own. Their cranial capacity averaged around 1,600 cubic centimetres, compared to our modern human average of about 1,350. At first glance, this number seems to shout superiority. Larger brain, greater intelligence. But size is not everything. A whale has a brain larger still, and yet it thinks differently. What matters is not only size, but organisation, how different regions are proportioned, how connections fire and sustain. In Neanderthals, the shape of the skull reveals subtle differences, a story not of less, but of other. Fossil endocasts, the impressions left by the brain against bone, offer glimpses. These suggest that the rear portions of the brain, those linked with vision and motor control, were proportionally larger than in modern humans. The frontal lobes, associated with planning and complex social thought, were present too, but their balance may have differed. Imagine a mind tuned to the demands of a cold, vast landscape, sharper visual processing, keener spatial awareness, refined motor coordination. To survive in Ice Age Europe, such strengths were not luxuries, they were lifelines. Picture a Neanderthal scanning a snowy valley. Every contour, every shift of shadow becomes information. Where we might see only white expanse, they may have discerned trails, animal signs, the faint movements that promised prey or warned of danger. Their eyes, guided by neural architecture, perhaps read the land like a living script. In thick forests or dim caves, enhanced vision could make the difference between a missed chance and a full larder. And yet, their frontal regions were not absent, not diminished. Evidence suggests they could plan, sequence and anticipate. Skills already glimpsed in their tool-making. They may have thought in ways parallel to ours, though tuned by different priorities. Did their brains emphasize immediate survival more, while ours evolved toward broader social networks and symbolic abstraction? This remains debated. What we can say is that their cognitive profile was different, but not deficient. There is even a quirky theory that Neanderthal brains were partly designed for snow. Their larger eye sockets, combined with those expanded visual regions, may have supported better low-light vision, an adaptation to long, dim winters at high latitudes. Imagine stepping into a twilight forest where our eyes strain, but theirs adjust with ease, catching details we would miss. A joke among researchers sometimes calls it the night vision advantage, a playful nod to their possible perceptual edge. But here caution is needed. Endocasts are rough maps, not precise blueprints. They tell us the outer shape of brain regions, but not the inner circuits, not the subtle chemistry of thought. We cannot know exactly how they perceived or remembered. To equate volume with ability risks oversimplification. Some scientists warn against reading too much into those swollen lobes, reminding us that brains are complex symphonies, not isolated instruments. Still, the traces we do see compel respect. Larger vision centres may explain their careful spatial strategies, their reliance on close-quarter hunting, their navigation of complex terrains. Robust motor regions may have aided the fine control needed for toolmaking, or the physical demands of thrusting spears and shaping stone. Their minds, in other words, were calibrated to their environment, just as their bodies were. Not weaker minds, not slower minds, just minds attuned to ice, stone and shadow. Imagine a winter night in the cave. The firelight glows, children sleep, hunters rest. A Neanderthal gazes at the flicker, eyes reflecting flame. What passes through that mind? Plans for tomorrow's hunt? Memories of trails, herds, patterns of snow? Thoughts of kin? The need to care for the young, the weak? We cannot step inside, but the evidence whispers that such reflections were well within reach. There is humility in recognizing this. For centuries we painted Neanderthals as dumb brutes, their large skulls mocked as caveman caricatures. Yet here we see complexity, brains large, specialized, functional, capable of planning and perception beyond instinct. The old story collapses under its own prejudice. They were not mindless. They were mindful in ways we are only beginning to appreciate. One can imagine them telling stories, not in words like ours, perhaps, but in gestures, sounds, shared memories. Around fire they may have replayed hunts, mapped routes with hands drawn in ash, or soothed children with vocal rhythms. These are the seeds of culture, of cognition that extends beyond individual survival. The mind, even without script or paint, leaves traces in how people gather, how they pass time, how they dream. Debates continue, of course. Some scholars insist that without abundant symbolic art, Neanderthals must have lacked the full spectrum of modern human imagination. Others argue that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, that perishable forms of art, song or ritual may simply have vanished in time. Between these poles lies the truth. We cannot pin down their minds with certainty, but we can no longer deny their depth. Let us pause here, at the edge of speculation. The cave is quiet, the fire soft. In the skulls of Neanderthals once burned thoughts we cannot fully translate, yet their echoes reach us still. They planned hunts, made tools, cared for kin, and looked at the same stars. Different brains, yes, but still human in the most essential sense. And from this reflection, we move gently forward. If their brains could perceive and plan, could coordinate and remember, what else did they express? Did their minds also seek beauty, meaning, symbol? The traces of pigments, ornaments and stone rings deep in caves suggest they did. To answer, we must follow them not only into thought, but into culture, into the symbols they left in stone and shell. The embers glow one last time before crumbling. Shadows drift across the cave walls as if painted by unseen hands. The mind of the Neanderthal stirs in those shadows, hinting at imagination beyond survival. And it is toward that imagination, that spark of symbol, that our story now bends. The cave is quiet but for the faint crackle of embers, and in that dim light one notices not only tools scattered on the ground, but traces of colour, fragments of shell, arrangements of stone. Here we step into one of the most haunting aspects of the Neanderthal world, their symbols. For if their minds could shape spears and tar, perhaps they could also shape meaning, reaching beyond the practical into the realm of expression. Archaeological discoveries suggest that Neanderthals used pigments, collected shells, and even built enigmatic structures deep within caves. One of the oldest examples lies in southern Spain, where caves hold traces of red and black pigments on stalactites, dated to more than 115,000 years ago, long before modern humans entered Europe. These marks are not random smears of nature. They appear to be deliberate, placed with intention. To smear colour on stone is to create symbol, to make the cave wall more than wall, to inscribe presence into permanence. Then there are the shells. At sites along ancient coastlines, archaeologists have found perforated shells stained with pigments, as if strung into necklaces or ornaments. Imagine a Neanderthal wearing a pendant of shell, rubbed with red ochre, catching the glow of firelight against chest or wrist. Jewellery is never only utility, it is statement, identity, perhaps even beauty. To adorn oneself is to say, I am more than survival, I am someone to be seen. Most astonishing of all are the stone circles at Bruniquel cave in France. Nearly 176,000 years ago, long before Homo sapiens set foot in Europe, Neanderthals ventured hundreds of metres into darkness. There, they broke stalagmites and arranged them into circular structures, lit by fire. The very act boggles the imagination. Why build circles in a place where no daylight ever reached? Why risk going so deep with only the dim glow of lamps? The purpose remains unknown, but the effort is undeniable. Organisation, planning, cooperation, all were required. To many researchers, this suggests ritual, some form of symbolic gathering beyond mere necessity. Pause for a moment and step into that cave with them. The air is cool and damp, the darkness absolute. Only the faint flicker of a lamp casts light, shadows leaping across rough stone. Around you, others place broken stalagmites into shapes, working silently, deliberately. The circle grows, enclosing space within space. Is it ceremony? Is it play? Is it memory? We cannot know. But in the silence, meaning lingers like smoke. A quirky image surfaces here. Neanderthals with pigment-streaked fingers, children perhaps smearing ochre on faces or walls, laughing as colour-stained skin. We often think of art as grand, paintings, sculptures, galleries, but perhaps their art was small, personal, fleeting. A necklace of shells, a streak of red across a brow, a handprint pressed on stone. In these gestures they claimed presence, carved identity into the flow of time, but debate continues fiercely. Some scholars argue that much of this evidence could be explained by practical use. Pigments might have served as protection against insects or preservatives for hides. Shells could have been collected for their utility rather than decoration. Even the stalagmite circles, some suggest they were mere shelters or storage, not symbols. The line between utility and meaning is blurred, and in archaeology, certainty is rare. Yet the accumulation of evidence, pigments here, ornaments there, deep structures beyond need, suggests something more than survival. Consider how symbolism often emerges in human societies. It begins not with grand temples, but with small acts, decorating skin, marking space, carrying objects for more than use. For Neanderthals, we may be witnessing this very threshold, the moment when survival began to carry echoes of identity and meaning. They may not have painted murals like later humans, but they left traces of intention that whisper of imagination. Imagine again a night in a cave. The fire glows red, and one individual dips fingers into ochre, smearing it across a stone pendant. Another lifts the pendant into firelight, watching it gleam. Children watch, eyes wide, perhaps mimicking with bits of ash. Laughter rises, low voices hum. The act itself becomes communal. In that moment, survival gives way to something more. Expression, perhaps even beauty. It is humbling to realise these acts took place over 100,000 years ago. Long before written language, before sculpture, before cities, there were humans in caves smearing pigment, stringing shells, arranging stone. Their symbols did not endure as monuments, but they endured in fragments, enough for us to glimpse them across the abyss of time. And perhaps that is the most haunting aspect. We will never know the full meaning, To them, it may have been obvious, ordinary, shared. To us, it is mystery. But the fact of its existence matters. It tells us Neanderthals were not mere brutes surviving day to day. They were beings who, like us, reached for meaning, adorned themselves, built in darkness, touched the world with intention. Pause and feel this connection. Your own hands, stained by ink or paint, holding jewellery or tokens, are echoes of theirs. The desire to decorate, to symbolise, to shape meaning. It runs deeper than history. It is part of what it means to be human, even if expressed differently in each branch of our lineage. The embers of the fire glow faintly now, red like the ochre they once used. Shells lie in shadows, their holes worn smooth by cords long vanished. Circles of stone stand silent in darkness, mute witnesses of gatherings long forgotten. And yet, in their silence, they speak. We were here, we imagined, we expressed. From here, the story moves gently outward. For if they adorned themselves and built in caves, they also mingled with us. Their legacy is not only in pigment and shell, but in blood itself, woven into our DNA. To follow their symbols is to follow their footsteps into our very bodies. And so the next step is inheritance, not of objects, but of genes. The quiet fire of Neanderthal still glowing within us. The cave darkens, only a faint shimmer of ash remains. Shells gleam faintly. Pigments smudge stone. Circles rest in silence. In that fading glow lies a bridge, carrying us from symbols of stone to symbols within flesh. The cave grows still, the shells and pigments resting in silence. Yet even as those fragile traces fade, another inheritance remains, one far more enduring than ochre stains or stone rings. It lies not in artifacts, but in us, carried quietly in every heartbeat woven into the fabric of our DNA. For the Neanderthals did not vanish without leaving descendants. Through moments of contact and mingling, their legacy lingers within modern humans, a fire smouldering beneath the skin. Genetic studies over the past 2 decades have revealed a striking truth. People living today outside of Africa carry between 1 and 4% of their DNA from Neanderthals. This means that when Homo sapiens expanded out of Africa around 50 to 60,000 years ago and met the Neanderthals already living in Europe and Western Asia, the meeting was not only confrontation but union. They shared more than landscapes and hunts. They shared blood. Picture the encounter. 2 groups meet along a riverbank. Their fires visible in the distance, their silhouettes strange yet familiar. Perhaps suspicion first, then curiosity, then recognition. For those separated by hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, they were still human, still capable of seeing kinship in the eyes of the other. At some point across valleys and generations, children were born carrying both lineages, and from those children, the genetic threads wove forward into us. The legacy of that mingling is more than symbolic. Certain Neanderthal genes influence traits in living humans today. Variants have been linked to aspects of immune response, helping defend against pathogens. Others affect skin and hair, influencing pigmentation, thickness, or even susceptibility to sunburn. In a way, the climate adaptations of Neanderthals still ripple through us, shaping how some bodies respond to environment. To look in the mirror is to see, faintly, their reflection. There are quirky reminders of this inheritance. Some Neanderthal genes are associated with keratin, a protein that shapes hair and nails. Imagine running your fingers through your hair and realizing in some distant sense you are touching the gift of Neanderthal ancestry. Other gene variants have been linked to how we process fats, perhaps echoing a time when high-calorie diets were vital for cold survival. Even quirks of mood and sleep may carry their shadow, as certain genetic fragments influence circadian rhythm. A quiet reminder that their nights under starry skies may still whisper in ours. But debate surrounds the meaning of these legacies. Some genes seem beneficial, others less so. Certain variants are tied to modern health risks, from diabetes to autoimmune disorders, as if the adaptations of Ice Age survival sometimes clash with modern environments. Scientists argue over how much of our physiology truly stems from Neanderthal inheritance, and how much is coincidence. The percentages are small and the pathways complex. Yet even amid uncertainty, the fact remains, they are inside us. It is worth imagining what this meant for identity had Neanderthals themselves understood it. To them, these unions may not have seemed extraordinary. A stranger from another group joins the camp. A child is born. Life goes on. They could not know that in doing so they ensured their lineage would survive long after their own people dwindled. Their extinction, in a sense, was incomplete. They were absorbed. Their fire folded into ours. Pause for a moment and let that truth settle. If you are of non-African descent, roughly 2% of your DNA carries their mark. That means in every breath, every heartbeat, a fragment of Neanderthal pulses alongside Homo sapiens. You are, in a small but profound way, a descendant of both. Their footprints lead not only into caves and valleys, but into your very body. And this inheritance is not uniform. Studies suggest different populations carry different Neanderthal variants, reflecting multiple episodes of interbreeding in different places. It was not a single meeting, but many, scattered across time and geography. Asia shows evidence of repeated mingling. Europe too bears traces. This diversity makes the story richer, a tapestry woven not in one strand but in many threads across continents. Of course, questions remain. How frequent were these encounters? Were they rare, furtive unions at the edges of groups, or more sustained exchanges in shared territories? Were they acts of peace, alliance, or coercion? Archaeology cannot answer fully, and genetics offers only shadows. We know the fact of mingling, but not its texture, its emotional register. That remains in silence, perhaps forever. Yet, there is something profoundly moving in knowing that Neanderthals did not vanish as strangers. They became part of us, just as we became part of them. Their extinction is softened by continuity, their absence by presence. In our bones and blood, in our skin and hair, in our very resistance to disease, they live on. The fire they carried is not fully extinguished. It smoulders within our cells, a quiet ember across millennia. Imagine now a Neanderthal mother holding her child, born of two lineages. She does not know the significance, does not foresee the future. She only knows the warmth of the infant against her chest, the sound of breath steady in sleep. Around her, the camp murmurs, the fire glows, the stars gleam overhead. That child is the bridge, the living bond between peoples. And through countless generations, that bond carries forward until you and I sit here, telling their story. At this point in the night, we might wonder, what mattered most in their fate? Was it climate that ended them, or competition, or simply the weight of numbers? Or did their genes ensure that extinction was never complete, that absorption was survival by another name? These are questions scholars still debate, but for us, they frame a poignant truth. In every sense that matters, Neanderthals remain. And so we end this section with a question meant for you. Which do you think was the greater legacy? The tools and pigments they left in caves, or the DNA they left in our bodies? Both endure, one in museums and layers of ash, the other in every living cell. Perhaps the answer is both. Culture and blood, symbol and gene, together forming the quiet inheritance of Neanderthal. The fire in the cave dims, but within us, the ember glows. As the smoke curls upward into darkness, we turn toward the winds of change, the climate that shifted, the challenges that mounted. For the story of inheritance is only one side, the story of decline waits in the storms outside, and so we follow them into colder winds, harsher seasons, and the final chapters of their time. The night outside the cave thickens, the wind rising in uneven gusts. Step out into the Ice Age world, and you feel at once how fragile warmth is. Snow blows sideways, the horizon fades, and the land itself seems to shift under the weight of weather. For the Neanderthals, climate was not a distant concept or a number in a chart. It was the daily force that carved valleys, froze rivers, and decided whether herds would gather or scatter. And across millennia, climate shifted in ways so dramatic that even their sturdy bodies and clever tools could not always keep pace. We know today that the Pleistocene epoch was a time of restless climate, swinging between glacial and interglacial phases. For Neanderthals, this meant living not in a single stable environment, but in a world that flipped between extremes. Around 100,000 years ago, glaciations deepened, bringing colder and drier conditions to Europe. Vast ice sheets spread southward, reshaping landscapes, sealing rivers beneath frozen crusts, and reducing forests to sparse patches of tundra. For a people dependent on both large animals and plant supplements, each shift was a disruption. One of the most dramatic patterns were the Heinrich events, sudden pulses of icebergs breaking into the North Atlantic, dumping fresh water, disrupting ocean currents, and sending ripples of cold and drought across Europe. Archaeological layers show their impact. Sites abandoned, tool use shifting, populations contracting. Imagine a family returning to a valley that once teemed with reindeer, only to find it barren, wind blasted, the migration routes broken. The land that had fed generations could change within a lifetime. Picture a Neanderthal child standing at the mouth of a cave, watching the horizon blur in white. Yesterday there may have been herds, today silence. The sky bruises with storm, the cold cuts sharper than ever. The adults know the signs. This winter will not be like the last. Every step into snow is heavier, every hunt more uncertain. Survival, already a balance, teeters closer to collapse. And yet, they endured such swings for hundreds of thousands of years. This is a fact worth pausing on. Climate did not defeat them immediately. It challenged, shaped, and sometimes scattered them, but they adapted again and again. Their barrel chests, their powerful limbs, their knowledge of terrain, all were forged against such storms. They were resilient, but resilience has limits. When climate shifts became sharper, more frequent or longer lasting, their margin of survival grew thinner. There is a quirky metaphor sometimes used by scientists. Neanderthal life was like reading a lunar calendar written in ice. The seasons returned, but never quite the same. Each decade brought subtle changes, rivers freezing earlier, herds moving later, plants appearing in fewer numbers. To live was to memorize these changes, to track the sky, to sense patterns invisible to outsiders. In a way, their culture was a diary written in weather, each generation updating the entries with new lessons, new losses. But here lies a debated question. Was climate alone enough to drive them toward extinction? Some researchers argue yes, that repeated swings in temperature-fragmented populations, isolating groups, reducing genetic diversity until survival became mathematically impossible. Others argue no, that while climate hurt them, it could not have erased a species so resilient without other pressures layered on top. The truth is elusive, a puzzle with missing pieces. Still, climate's role is undeniable. Isotopic records from cave formations show droughts that stretched for centuries, reducing water and plant life. Pollen samples reveal forests vanishing, replaced by grasslands too sparse for many animals. Each ecological shift rippled upward, cutting into the calories available to Neanderthals. Remember, their bodies required enormous energy, thousands of calories each day. In lean times, every deficit carried sharper risk. Imagine a winter where no herds appear. The fire burns, but meat dwindles. Children cry with hunger. The old grow weaker. The hunters press farther, but the snow grows deeper, the cold harsher. One family band, once strong, becomes a handful of survivors. Over time, such stories repeat across regions. Small populations shrink smaller. Valleys once crowded with footprints fall silent. And yet, let us not picture them as passive victims. Even in hardship, Neanderthals showed adaptability. They shifted diets when possible, gathering more roots and seeds, using plants not only for food but for medicine. They moved camps, tracked herds across longer distances, huddled close to fire. They endured because endurance was their essence. but even the strongest rope phrase when pulled too many times. Climate tugged at them again and again until threads began to loosen. Pause here. Imagine standing on a ridge in Ice Age Europe. The wind slaps your face, snow blinds your eyes, silence stretches across miles. Beneath the snow, bones lie buried, of bison, of mammoth, of Neanderthal alike. This is the stage where climate played its harshest role. Not a single storm, not a single winter, but centuries of relentless change, grinding down resilience like stone worn by water. Scholars still debate how much of their decline can be laid at nature's feet. Perhaps climate was the spark, weakening them. Perhaps it was only one player in a larger tragedy. But as we listen to the howling wind of that age, it is clear that no species could endure forever against such relentless shifts. The fire in our cave burns low, the embers fragile. Outside, snow falls steadily, muffling all sound. In that hush we pause, let the weight of climate's role sink in, not as an enemy with a face, but as an indifferent force, patient and vast, against which even the strongest body and brightest fire must struggle. And now, into that silence, another sound approaches. It is not the wind, not the snow, but footsteps, new ones, lighter, quicker, belonging to Homo sapiens. With them came competition, disease, and new pressures that would press against Neanderthals already strained by climate. To follow the story, we must now shift from storms of weather to storms of encounter. The storm is quieted, the snow falling more gently, but another pressure moves across the land, one not born of wind or ice, but of footsteps. Around 45,000 years ago, Homo sapiens entered Europe, walking out of Africa with new tools, new strategies, and growing numbers. To the Neanderthals, who had endured the moods of climate for hundreds of millennia, this arrival was another kind of storm, less visible in the sky, but just as disruptive on the ground. The archaeological record shows a period of overlap. For several thousand years, Neanderthals and modern humans shared the same valleys, rivers, and caves. Their footprints mingled, sometimes crossing paths, sometimes running parallel, and in this overlap competition began, not only for prey and territory, but for survival itself. Homo sapiens brought with them lighter frames, longer limbs, and perhaps greater endurance for running and travelling long distances. Their weapons were often more versatile, projectile points that could be thrown from afar, reducing risk in hunts. Their social groups may have been larger, networks more connected, allowing knowledge and resources to flow farther. Against these advantages, Neanderthals' close-quarter hunting and smaller populations seemed increasingly fragile. Picture a valley where reindeer migrate. Two groups wait, Neanderthals on one ridge with thrusting spears, modern humans on another with lighter projectiles. Both strike, both succeed, but one method carries fewer injuries, fewer costs. Over time, such differences compound. A broken rib can mean death in a small group. In a larger one, it is absorbed. Competition was not always about outright battle. It was about efficiency, about who could secure more food with less loss. Still, it is tempting to imagine encounters more direct. Did they ever face each other across firelit clearings, weapons raised, voices shouting in tongues neither understood? Some evidence suggests conflict, trauma on bones, abrupt site abandonments, but nothing proves large-scale warfare. It may have been subtler, a slow press of one group expanding while the other receded, territory by territory, year by year. And then there was disease. When two populations meet after long separation, microbes often play a decisive role. Homo sapiens may have carried pathogens new to Neanderthals, viruses or bacteria that spread quickly through small groups unprepared for them. Just as later waves of contact in recorded history brought devastation through disease, so too may this ancient meeting have carried invisible enemies. The archaeological record is silent here, but genetic studies hint that immune-related genes from Neanderthals and sapiens intermingled, suggesting disease pressure was real and consequential. But perhaps the deepest vulnerability was not climate or competition, or disease alone, but demographics. Neanderthal groups were small, often fewer than a few dozen in a band scattered across vast territories. Total population estimates rarely exceed 70,000 across their entire range at any one time, numbers smaller than a modern city. With such limited size, every loss mattered. A failed hunt, an outbreak, a harsh winter could reduce a group to unsustainable levels. Genetic models from 2019 suggest that demographic fragility alone, small populations, inbreeding and lack of recovery, could have doomed them, even without added pressures. Small groups tend to lose genetic diversity, making them less resilient to disease or environmental change. Once numbers dip too low, chance itself becomes enemy. A storm, a fire, or a single epidemic can erase entire communities. For Neanderthals, survival was not only against climate and competition, but against the mathematics of small numbers. Imagine a quiet village in winter. Only a handful of families huddle near the fire. One elder falls ill, then another. Food runs short, a child does not survive the cold. In such tiny groups, each death is magnified, each absence felt as a hole in the fabric of community. Compare this to a larger sapiens group, where losses, though tragic, can be absorbed by sheer numbers. Demographics are not dramatic, but they are decisive, grinding away quietly until resilience falters. There is a haunting image here, one whispered by archaeologists, the village without children. Some sites show low numbers of young remains, hinting at declining birth rates toward the end of Neanderthal existence. Whether caused by stress, malnutrition, or social disruption, fewer births meant fewer futures. A camp without the laughter of children is not simply quiet, it is a warning, an echo of a lineage thinning to silence. Debate continues over the balance of these factors. Was climate the main culprit, with sapiens only finishing what the ice began? Or was competition decisive, sapiens out-hunting and outbreeding Neanderthals into disappearance? Or were demographics the root, small groups simply too fragile to withstand any pressure? Most scholars agree there was no single cause, but a convergence, a storm of climate, competition, disease, and small numbers, each reinforcing the others until endurance was exhausted. And yet, amid this convergence, we must remember they were not failures. Neanderthals survived for hundreds of thousands of years, through more storms and shifts than we can count. Their disappearance was not sudden collapse, but gradual fading, a retreat of footprints from valley to valley until only echoes remained. And even then, as we saw before, their DNA carried forward, absorbed into the very people who outlasted them. Extinction, in this case, was never complete. Picture the last generations. A small group gathers in a cave, fire flickering weakly. The herd migrations are fewer, the winters harsher, the encounters with sapiens more frequent. Numbers dwindle, children fewer, yet still they sit by fire, still they shape tools, still they sing or murmur in voices we cannot hear. Their world narrows, but their humanity does not fade. The fire before us crackles softly. Ash drifts upward like fragile snowflakes, then vanishes. In that quiet, we pause to reflect. Neanderthals did not lose to a single enemy, but to many. Climate chilled them, sapiens pressed them, disease weakened them, numbers betrayed them. A chorus of pressures, overlapping until silence fell. And so we stand here, on the threshold of their absence. Before we leave them behind, we must gather their story once more. Summarize what they were, what they gave, and what remains. For in remembering them, we honour not only their loss, but their endurance, their strength, their culture, and their legacy still alive in us. The last ember shifts, glowing faint red. It casts the shape of a hand against the wall, fingers spread wide as if reaching across time. That hand, perhaps, is still ours. The cave is hushed now, the fire low, its glow no longer fierce but steady, as if inviting reflection rather than action. After our long journey beside the Neanderthal, through their strength, their warmth, their tools, their minds, their symbols, and their decline, it is time to gather threads into a gentle braid. This is the moment not of revelation but of remembrance, of pausing to honour what has been seen and what must be carried forward in memory. First, recall their bodies, those remarkable instruments of survival. The barrel-shaped chest that breathed deep into cold air, the broad noses that warmed icy winds, the teeth worn down by labour as much as by eating. Their skeletons spoke of power, hands that could grip with crushing force, arms that endured impact again and again. They were shaped by Ice Age Europe into beings who could wrestle with mammoths and still return to the fire at night. To think of them only as brutes is to miss the elegance of this design. They were sculpted by climate itself into specialists of endurance. Then remember their strategies. Hunting not from afar but at arm's length, thrusting spears into charging beasts, absorbing injuries in patterns that mirrored rodeo riders of our modern world. They read landscapes like maps, funneled herds through valleys, set ambushes with knowledge carried from elder to child. Their survival was choreography, terrain, season, cooperation, all moving together in rhythm. And though the risks were immense, their communities bore them, caring for injured members, proving that strength was as much social as physical. Recall, too, their appetites. 3,000 to 5,000 calories a day demanded constant vigilance, constant hunting, constant calculation. Their diets placed them atop the food chain, nitrogen isotopes whispering of red meat and marrow, yet their teeth also held secrets of plants, herbs chewed for healing, bark for pain relief, seeds ground into paste. In their hunger was also wisdom, an early pharmacy hidden in roots and twigs. To eat was not only to survive, but to practice knowledge, a science born of taste and trial. From food and hunt, we drifted to fire, the hearth that was kitchen, forge and lamp. Fire cooked their meals, hardened their tools, lit their deepest caves. It stretched their nights into time for stories, for teaching, for shadows dancing on walls. And from fire came tar, the black glue of ingenuity, made through careful control of heat in multi-step processes. Birch bark transformed into sticky resin is not an accident. It is chemistry guided by patience, proof of minds that planned and remembered. Those minds themselves were housed in skulls slightly larger than ours, shaped differently, tuned to vision, movement, and the landscapes of snow and shadow. Not inferior, not empty, but distinct. Brains that saw farther in dim light, that remembered paths across valleys, that coordinated hunts and crafts. In those minds stirred imagination too, seen in pigments smeared on shells, necklaces strung with ochre, and stalagmite rings built deep in caves, to adorn, to mark, to build in darkness. These are acts of symbol, of meaning, of culture, reaching beyond mere survival. And finally their fate. Climate shifted, storms of cold and drought pulling threads of resilience thin. Into that strain came Homo sapiens with new tools, larger groups, and perhaps new diseases. Numbers dwindled, children fewer, populations too small to recover. It was not a single blow, but many, converging until the footprints faded. Yet extinction was never absolute. For in their mingling with us, they left a legacy in our very blood. Between 1% and 4% of the DNA of people outside Africa still carries their mark. They are not gone. They live in hair, in skin, in immune defences, in the quiet echo of genes. Pause here. Let the memory settle. They were strong of body, clever of hand, thoughtful of mind, expressive of spirit. They endured storms, cared for one another, imagined, built and loved. To see them only as brutish cave dwellers is to miss their humanity, which was different in shape but equal in depth. They remind us there is not only one way to be human. Perhaps the best way to hold them in mind is as companions rather than curiosities. Picture them sitting beside you now, firelight on their faces. The eyes are familiar, the hands too, even if broader, rougher. In their laughter, in their care for children, in their wonder at stars, they are not alien but kin. Their story is not a failed branch but a different path, one that ran alongside ours until it merged, leaving traces forever. And so, as we prepare to step into the final stretch of this long night's tale, let us mark 3 points to remember. First, their bodies were not clumsy but crafted by ice into strength. Second, their minds were not empty but filled with patience, skill and symbol. Third, their end was not disappearance but transformation, their fire carried into us. These are the gifts of memory we hold. The fire crackles softly, the last wood collapsing into glowing ash. Shadows deepen on the cave walls, lengthening, softening. This is the hour for reflection, not urgency. And as we sit in this gentle hush, I invite you, listener, to pause with me. If you found meaning in walking with the Neanderthals tonight, consider sharing that thought. Leave a trace, a comment, as they once left pigments and shells. Let the story continue in quiet echoes. Soon, the embers will dim further, and the night will guide us into wind down. But for now, we rest in remembrance, warmed by the presence of those who were, and who remain within us still. The cave is nearly dark now. Only the faintest glow of embers remains, a soft red heartbeat in the ash. The air is still, heavy with smoke and warmth, and the night beyond stretches vast and cold. This is the time for endings, for slowing breath and loosening thought, for letting the story dissolve into the quiet rhythm of sleep. The Neanderthals have walked with us through body and mind, through storm and fire, through symbol and silence. Now we pause to let them rest, and with them, ourselves. Imagine the last footprints fading in snow. The storm has passed, leaving the land hushed, each ridge softened, each valley buried in white. A trail leads away from the cave, steps pressed deep, then shallow, then gone, erased by the wind. The Neanderthals are no longer here in flesh, but their traces linger like faint stars against the dark. When we breathe, when we dream, when we gaze at the night sky, we carry something of them. They are not only a story in the past, they are a presence in the present, folded into our very being. Let us recall gently what we have seen. Their bodies, carved by cold, strong and compact, bearing the marks of resilience. Their hunts, close and dangerous, filled with courage and injury alike. Their appetites, immense, driving them to mastery of both meat and medicine. Their fires, glowing kitchens, workshops and lamps, turning darkness into shelter. Their minds, tuned to vision and space, building tools through patience and teaching. Their symbols, painted in ochre, strung in shells, arranged in stone deep in caves. Their fate, a slow dwindling under the weight of climate, competition and fragile numbers. And finally their legacy, not lost but living, written into our very DNA. Each of these threads is now woven into a single fabric, a tapestry of memory. And like any tapestry, when you step back, you see not only the parts but the whole. A people who are human in their own way, who walked the same earth, who gazed at the same stars, who left their echo in us. Their story is not failure but variation, not silence but whisper. They remind us that humanity is not one path but many, converging, diverging, and sometimes rejoining in ways that carry forward. Pause here. Close your eyes. Picture the cave not as cold stone but as a cradle of firelight. The figures within sit close, their voices low, their shadows long. Outside, the night is vast, the sky scattered with stars. They tilt their heads back, perhaps as we do, tracing patterns in the constellations. Did they see animals in the stars, as we later did? Did they imagine stories written across the heavens? We cannot know, but we can feel the kinship of that gaze. To look at the sky is to dream beyond the ground beneath our feet, and in that dream we are the same. A quirky thought lingers as we wind down. Somewhere in your own body a tiny fragment of Neanderthal DNA is at work, maybe shaping a strand of hair, maybe tuning your immune response, maybe stirring the rhythm of your sleep tonight. It is as if their fire still burns faintly in us, not a blaze but an ember, glowing quietly through generations. You are, in a small but profound way, their descendant. Their story is not only in books or caves, It is in you, breathing, dreaming, listening. Yet let us not dwell on science alone. There is also poetry in their presence. Their footprints in snow are like verses of a song half heard, fading but not gone. Their handprints in pigment are like whispers on stone saying, "We were here, we imagined, we lived." Their circles of stalagmites deep in caves are like prayers carved in darkness, waiting centuries for someone to notice. These are not the relics of brutes, but the gestures of humans reaching for meaning, as we all do. And so, in this last chapter, we let them fade not into tragedy, but into peace. The embers dim, the cave grows still, the snow outside glows faintly under moonlight. The footprints have vanished, but the stars remain. Above us the sky stretches endless, the same sky they once watched. Beneath us the earth turns, carrying both their memory and our future. Breathe slowly now. Inhale the quiet. Exhale the weight of the long night. Let your thoughts drift like smoke, rising, softening, disappearing into the dark. The Neanderthals are resting, and so may you. Their story is told, their presence honoured, their legacy secure. The cave closes gently around us, a womb of stone and shadow. The fire is almost gone, only a faint glow left among ash. You are safe here, in the warmth of memory, in the rhythm of story, in the echo of kinship that spans 100,000 years. Outside, the wind hushes. Inside, the silence deepens. And as we end, let the motifs of this journey return one last time. The cave that sheltered, the primal fire that burned, the footprints fading in snow, the starry sky above. Cave, fire, footprints, sky. These are the symbols of our night together. They bind the story like a soft cord, carrying you toward rest. Good night now. May the embers glow softly in your dreams. May the footprints guide you gently across the snow. May the stars keep their quiet watch above. The Neanderthals sleep, and so may you.